And given the housing crisis, why on earth would the government still persist in bringing 750,000 people into Australia between now and the middle of next year?
Well, I agree. I think that's very unwise, and I've been banging on this drum for a long time. In fact, going right back to my time working with Prime Minister Abbott, that Australia has sensibly had a very rapid migration program for a long time now, but nevertheless it was dramatically increased from what was already a high level in the late period of the Howard government, and then was increased again under Prime Minister Turnbull. It's now is being increased massively again, partly as a catch-up because there was relatively no net overseas migration to Australia during the pandemic. Nevertheless, the trouble is you can't do these things without focusing not just on it's being promoted as something beneficial for the labour market because we're under such strain, businesses under such strain to find workers, but it has all these other impacts, in particular on the amenity. Are we building enough roads to accommodate all these people in the cities they're going to be living in? Enough roads and rail? Are we building enough houses for them to live in? What's the impact on renters and rental rates for Australians who are here? All of these are major problems you can't just solve by flooding more people into the country. So I think it's very short-sighted. Unfortunately, it's the sort of short-sighted attitude that lots of governments have been taking for a long while now in Australia.
Right, talk to me about the RBA. I know you used to work at the RBA. There's a consideration in Canberra about whether or not Phil Lowe gets reappointed. His term ends in September. I suspect it's on the cabinet agenda already. They'll be making those decisions. Names thrown around if he's not reappointed. The current head of Treasury, Stephen Kennedy, the head of Finance, Jenny Wilkinson, the head of the ABS, David Gruen. These are all Canberra types, but also his deputy, Michelle Bullock. If they keep him, they're not going to be able to keep blaming him. If they put someone else in, of course, they own that appointment too, and they're stuck with those decisions, much harder also to blame. It's been a blame game up until now for Jim Chalmers. Nothing to do with me, he says, it's all the Reserve Bank. Do you think they'll get rid of him? And out of those list of names, do you think anyone's more favoured to get the job?
It's hard to say who might be more favoured to get the job. Let me step back for a moment and say, I do actually believe that it would be appropriate to have a change of Governor of the Reserve Bank because I believe that the Reserve Bank, under the current Governor and the previous Deputy Governor, Guy Debelle, made the biggest monetary policy mistakes that we've had in Australia since the late 1980s. So we were blessed to have two extremely good governors in Ian Macfarlane and Glenn Stevens, but under Phil Lowe, some significant mistakes were made back in 2017, back in the second half of 2019, even before the pandemic, and then most famously during the pandemic. These extremely rash promises that then had to be broken, that interest rates that the cash rate would be held at zero all the way through until 2024. So people are entitled to be unhappy with the performance of the Reserve Bank. That said, I think of all of those names, they're all actually very good economists. And actually, I think if any of those were selected, they would probably do a good job. I, in particular, think that Michelle Bullock has actually performed very well. She's the current Deputy Governor. I used to work with her a while, many years ago, back 15 years ago, more than 15 years ago, in the payments area of the Reserve Bank. And she's had a lot of wide experience in different parts of the bank. And I think has performed well as Deputy Governor. And I think she would be an outstanding candidate. But David Gruen and Jenny Wilkinson also have extensive experience working in the Reserve Bank. And Stephen Kennedy, of course, as the current Secretary of the Treasury, has experience sitting on the board of the Reserve Bank, as he's done ever since his appointment. So I think all of those would be good candidates, but I think for once it would actually be really valuable to have a change in the leadership. It doesn't necessarily have to come from outside. I think Michelle Bullock would do a terrific job, but I think it would be appropriate for there to be a change at the top.
All right, we'll see what happens. I think it would be on the cabinet agenda. I think the decision will be imminent, given the time it takes to settle someone into these roles. So we'll see what happens. Andrew Stone, thank you. Great to see you. Have a good weekend.